Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Better Together podcast, where we get behind the scenes of what it really takes to build a business and a life that works. I'm Shawn Sundsvold, along with my partner in life and in business, Kelly Sundsvold. Today's guests are Kent Kubie and Bryan Eckert, co-founders of KubiKai, a consultancy that blends operational expertise, venture insight, and straight-shooting honesty to help founders and investors make smart decisions. Between the two of them, they have over 50 years of leadership and business growth experience, and they seek to solve painful problems they saw again and again in the business world. Founders with great ideas, but no operational footing, and investors placing big bets without asking the right questions. At KubiKai, Kent and Bryan have created a system to identify what makes a startup fundable, using a blend of financial acumen, founder archetypes, and brutally honest due diligence. But this isn't just a theory. Kent and Bryan's work is deeply personal. They've been inside failing startups and walked away from misaligned partnerships along the way and have learned the hard way what not to do. Now they help others avoid these traps if they're willing to take a clear-eyed look at the real work it takes to scale a business. Kent and Bryan, welcome to the show. We're really glad you guys are here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. Well, let's just get started at the beginning here. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and what led you both to starting KubiKai.
And I'll take the first shot at that. A couple of years ago, I was with a startup and we had dumped all kinds of financial calories into it. And the operational side of it was basically sucking up all the capital to actually do any sales and marketing, which I ran. And I could just see that it was going in a bad direction. And there was a culture misalignment there as well. And so I figured, let's pass on, this knowledge, like you said earlier, into the failed side of it. And let's not make those same mistakes again. It's been about 2 years now, and we've had a fun journey.
And along the journey, Bryan, you somehow got involved in this. How did you come along into the story here with Kent?
Kent and I first met probably 15 years ago. We worked together at a company that had developed a leading edge, kind of one-of-a-kind tool to help diagnose a serious medical condition that kills, 100,000 Americans every year. The details really aren't important in this conversation. So we met on kindred spirits in terms of problem solving. Mm-hmm. And I mean, for me personally, kind of why Kent and I got together about a year ago now. Stage of my life, I'm probably older than the three of you put together. And it was time for me to do something new and different. And part of it was I'd always wanted to be in a role where I could collectively use all of my professional learnings over a very long period of time. Everything from bagging groceries back in the day for 90 cents an hour to turning around billion-dollar healthcare systems, right? And all sorts of stuff in between. And this is a perfect opportunity for Kent and I to combine all of our extensive knowledge bases on how great companies can and should be run and to help companies that aren't there yet close that gap.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's awesome. I love that you guys came together and you figured out that synergy to work together. I think there's something about that is really important, is finding that partner that can really make yourself better, make your business better, and work together. So on that, tell us a little bit about the work that you have been doing to help businesses.
I'll take a first crack at that. So we'll go on the founder side first, or the startup side. And it's really kind of identifying, do they have the right players? Do they have the right systems and processes, and kind of what their coaching maturity level is? And then, trying to kind of dissect the business from, where they are today to what we call a non-negotiable objective, which is, kind of what does done look like for the business? Right. So 5 years from now, what does that look like? Is it, are you laying on the beach, having a fruity drink, or are you, getting ready to start your next thing? Whatever that exit looks like, we build out the systems and the plans to kind of put that together.
Awesome. And as part of like putting those plans together, what are some of the questions that you're really asking some of these business owners?
One of the most critical ones is what Kent mentioned a second ago, this notion of a non-negotiable objective. Kent and I kind of cooked this notion up, years ago, as what does done look like? And if you phrase it that way, no one knows really what you're talking about. So it kind of translates into what's this non-negotiable objective. And the criticality of that is most young companies drift, right? They don't have a laser focus. They're doing a bunch of different things at the same time, a bunch of different leaders doing a bunch of different things at the same time. What our research has shown, and our direct personal experience has shown, is that companies that have a laser focus on that N&O, on that what does done look like, can't help but be really successful. And if you don't have that, you can't help but fail. And so that's one thing we start with founders in particular. It's like if we don't see that N&O, is to get that from them or help them determine for their organization what that N&O happens to be.
It's kind of that idea of starting with the end in mind, right? It seems like that's kind of a big thing for you guys. And I think it's something I've heard over and over again, from people like yourselves of, if you don't know where you're going, it's hard to pick a place to start, right?
Yeah. There's a
And
thing,
so-
our coach just said something like that once.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And to get from here to there, there may be 1,000 steps, right? In reality, for a startup, there could very easily be a dozen steps, right? So it's one thing. Just we're talking about someone this morning. Most organizations, founders know where their companies are today with great precision, right? And they have a pretty decent sense of where they're going to be in the future. Getting there. Right, just crossing that chasm. That's a great book, right? Is crossing that chasm, and one of the early structural components of that is this non-negotiable objective, right? There are a bunch of other things that it takes to get there, but it's helping them get from here to there because we've helped a lot of companies and customers get from here to there.
Yeah. And along the way over the last couple of years, I'm sure you've worked with a wide range of companies. What are, besides the kind of the non-negotiable, objective on that one, what are some of the other common pitfalls you've seen over and over again?
Probably one of the biggest ones is the founder is also the best salesperson. And they have all the tacit knowledge and they're running, 1,000 miles an hour trying to close business. At the same time, they're trying to do other things to, operationalize the business, to, taking care of the finance side of it, right? So we see that a lot, and the unwillingness almost to bring that next level of person on and translate all your knowledge to them where you can go run the business, not be inside the business trying to be the hero. That's one of the archetypes that we've identified. Is we've got 45 or so different ones, and a lot of founders fall into multiple of those categories. But it's that founder that's the hero, and he wants to wear the Superman suit and cape every day.
Yeah, let's actually dive into that a little bit. And why is that so dangerous for founders?
One of the archetypes that the Superman, could be Superwoman too, right? That personality trait share is this notion of another pattern we've codified is the meddler, right? Is they need to be in everything. They need to be a part of every meeting, every customer conversation. Literally, they need to be everything. Old saying, chief cook and bottle washer, right? You can't do everything well. And the company can't possibly do everything well if there's someone meddling in every decision, every conversation, right? So, I don't know that we've seen too many of these super persons also not fall into that meddler category.
It's such an interesting combination, right? Because they want to be the hero and everything. And it's almost like they get nitpicky, right? Or micromanagey, because it's like they have to have their hand in everything. Let's just dig into that a little more. Like, how do you coach them out of that? What steps do you give somebody who's in that phase to start stepping back a little bit and learning to trust their team?
Yeah, we did some work earlier this year with a company out in Los Angeles. Industry doesn't really matter too much, but kind of the two co-founders basically, came up, through the streets in the kind of the print t-shirt business and hustled their tails off. But they knew how to do everything in the business, right? They knew how to go get the customer. They knew how to operationalize kind of the span of what they did. They're the best machine operators, they're the best designers, they're the best everything, best installers, right? And they have a great business, and we did an assessment of kind of their business and all the things that they should be kind of taking a look at and focusing on the business and being able to put the operational platform together so they can actually take a step back, train people, by building standard operating procedures and things like that, right? So that was a big risk item that we saw among, a bunch of other things. It took them a minute to take a step back from that, but they have acknowledged that, and they've actually done some, their SOPs in place and have trained some other people up. They still have a tendency to want to do stuff. I talked to the founder yesterday, and he was, driving back from an install of a wrap inside of a building that they do. Amazing. It's an amazing company. Yeah. That's one of their things that they know that they can't grow without letting go. And so I guess probably that letting go part is probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah. I know when we first talked, one of the things we spent a lot of time talking about was the idea that a lot of the business owners, they don't have the knowledge or the acumen that they need to lead their businesses towards profitability and towards growth. How do you and your team help them with this? Like, what are some tools you give them? Just how do you walk them through that process?
You want to take that one, Bryan? Want me to?
Yeah, sure. We have a series of kind of precision-driven diagnostic tools based on our collective experiences. So as opposed to just being conversational, there's really a lot of diagnostic rigor behind what's missing. So depending on the organization, depending on the founder we're working with, we can point to very specific characteristics that lead to success and failure. An AI model we've built this year has ingested data from over 1,000 companies, right? So we've added our expertise to that, and based on things as simple as pitch decks and websites and kind of monthly financial statements, collectively, we can show them, if you want to be a right tail performer, right? If you want to be a right tail performer, these are the things you have to do as demonstrated by looking at, 1,000 companies. But looking at the 1,000 companies, in that 1,000 plus group, there's maybe 60 archetypes that are these true right tail companies. You would know the brand names. I'm not going to get into them here. And then the rest of the spectrum are the folks that are just kind of in the status quo equilibrium. And then there are hundreds and hundreds of left tail failures, right, that we've analyzed, categorized, whole nomenclature behind. We can show founders, that they're in, the left tail, and we can show them why they're in the left tail, and we can show them how to get out of the left tail. So it's not just a matter of a, temperature, is it Fahrenheit or centigrade? We can show them where they are, how they got there, what they're going to, why they're going to stay there unless they do all these other things, again, say collectively based on our, 80 some odd years professional experience and these metrics.
That's really interesting. And, having so much data, it's really helpful. And I'm one of the pieces that you guys do work as well is helping companies get funded and find investors, right? So what are, you've got maybe working with a little bit larger company here. What are some of the blind spots that a lot of businesses have when they start looking for investors?
Usually there's a good story to tell, right? And then, the founder is usually fairly charismatic and dynamic. So, people, you get past the 30-second, part of the conversation. The things that we kind of look for are like true artifacts of success. Like, do you have a real pipeline, or is it made up, right, to make it look good on the deck? Do you have a system to onboard customers successfully at scale? Because that's what, somebody's going to, what are your uses of capital and what is the burn rate on that capital? Right. So how long can you actually sustain the business? So those are the things that we see a lot of swings and misses on, are those things like that. And as they bring that up into the funding side, the venture private equity side, sometimes those guys look for that and sometimes they don't. We have a case going on right now with a venture firm up in the Pacific Northwest that funded an ambitious startup a couple of years ago. And we looked at their pitch deck when they, as a kind of a test here, basically ran our algorithm against it and came back with, this one's kind of risky and be cautious about it.
Mhm.
And, since we already knew what the outcome was, the VC partner basically said, yeah, that's kind of what we looked at him, but we liked the founder and we invested. And that was 2 years ago. And finally, in a conversation, just kind of not prompted by anything, the founder of the company said, hey, we finally figured out what our ROI is to the client
Mhm.
after 2 years, right? Bryan and I were
Can't
talking.
make this stuff up, Shawn.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. Like 2 years to figure out, like, here's what our value proposition is. I'm sorry for my reaction. It just took me a moment.
No.
Yeah, and that was after a $500,000 investment had been made. So this was part of a routine governance
Yeah.
follow-up. And like most investors, the folks that we're working with, they're typically looking at a 5x to 10x successful exit.
Mhm.
And between 3 and 6 years, call it 4 or 5, whatever. So 2 years on the path to that exit have been completely wasted.
Yeah.
But there's been no return on that capital. The world's changed. The market has changed. And reading from our diagnostic on that company. Since you were looking for a couple of specifics, so we have eight recommended corrections. One of those is kind of lead with the ROI, right?
Mhm.
This organization has been leading with a technology platform. I'm sure you've never seen a company lead with a technology platform before, right?
Mm-mm.
It's always about the tech. It's not what the
Right.
tech does. So that's one of them. The same organization, we see this with a lot of founders, is narrowing their focus to one ICP. Right.
Okay.
As opposed to we can solve the technology issues for the world.
Mhm.
Is your ICP focused in healthcare? Is it focused in financial services? Is it in retail? Is it insurance? Right. Pick that. That's part of that non-negotiable objective. That's one of the things underpinning that
Mhm.
is, what's that market segment focus as opposed to, well, we serve everybody. It's like, yeah, no, you don't. You don't
Yeah.
serve everybody. And if you look at one of the things we found looking at the right tail performers, one thing they consistently have is a focus on a segment. Right.
Mm.
Some did by design, a couple tripped into that not knowing they were doing the right thing,
Yeah.
but a laser focus on something, is critical.
Yeah. And
And to
I'm
Ken's point, oh, go ahead.
Go, go. I was going to say, I want to catch on something that you both kind of mentioned is, and that was been part of the discussion is that you've worked with founders and you also work with, the investor side of it too. You're very uniquely placed that you kind of see both sides of every situation, right? And so you're working with these companies to help them, secure funding, build structures, build better governance. What are some things that a lot of businesses think they need, but throughout your research and what you guys have done and seen both sides of it, what are things that they think they need, but they really don't?
I'll pick on that one because I've probably fallen into this trap once or twice in my career. Is everybody thinks they need a CRM system.
Mm.
Right. What they need is a system, not a CRM system. So they need, to figure out what it is their sales motion looks like, what it is their ICP, as Bryan was saying, what's your target? What is the message to that target? And how does it resonate? Just like the example we were talking about, after 2 years, they said, well, our ROI is we saved this company, 90% of the cost of API management. And
Okay.
the VC partner was like, I think her jaw hit the floor. And that would be something that in our early diagnostics with someone like that, right? We would sit down with them and interview them, and we would have probably figured that out in like an hour
Mm-hmm.
because that part of it that's uniquely missing. I think the message to the marketplace is something that they all kind of miss. Like, what is the value to your customer and your customer's customer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Shawn. So I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bryan, please.
Okay, so one thing that we see, this is 100% on the founder side, is they all think money's going to solve their problem. And part of our diagnostic looks at the ability of the organization to withstand pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's one group we're working with that's, looking for, call it a $7 million check. They would be crushed by that. They wouldn't know what to do with that because
Interesting.
the founder there happens to be, the super person, right? Fingers in everything. They're just like the fly at the picnic. Right. It's like, where do I go? Where do I go? They would be crushed by $7 million. Right. Another firm we're talking with, they're looking for 2 million ish.
Mm-hmm.
And our analysis kind of points out rather specifically that, anything more than 1 million is going to crush them. And that the best
Wow.
next investment's probably, 5 or 600 because they don't have focus and direction.
Yeah.
Right. They don't have, they don't have a defined 90-day roadmap like to get the next customer.
Yeah.
Right. They're still guessing. They don't have, most companies on the founder side, they don't have a great governance structure. I mean, one thing that Kent and I've seen, and I certainly saw this back in the healthcare turnaround days, is the criticality of an activist board whose job it is, and a job they take seriously, to keep the company between the guardrails and to call out problems when there are problems, and critical, often missing, is demand corrective action. The founders are the be all, know alls, right? They don't need a board. They absolutely need a board to keep them honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, having, especially in those kind of situations, just having somebody to kind of help, like you said, put the guardrails in place, right? To do that. And I'm curious, as you guys have gotten your business going and, talking more a little bit about KubiKai, what are some of the challenges you guys have faced over the first couple years in starting a business? And if I could even ask, like, what archetypes would you guys put on yourselves that kind of helped you, right, understand how you needed to lead your business?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We probably have, tidbits of every one of them, because I think if you're honest with yourself, it's kind of like doing a Myers-Briggs test, You're predominantly one, but you're probably 10
Yeah.
ones as well. I think that the biggest thing was really kind of defining ultimately who benefits from our experience and really narrowing down that customer set. We did a lot of conversation last year with a specific segment in a security space, and people had all kinds of problems. They did not have the capital to solve the problem. So they were basically on the hamster wheel, running really, really fast in a business in that particular segment that was a race to zero on cost and what customers were willing to pay. Smaller firms would get completely lambasted by larger, national firms, just because they have the scale and they can tweak things. So once again, kind of finding and defining that particular segment, that's where we ended up working with a lot of founder side and startups, because we know tech, we know industry, and we've, kind of been inside and seen all of the gory details of what that kind of looks like, including, having a passive board versus an active board, or a board that would hold them accountable, right? So I think that was probably the biggest challenge is, kind of getting the definition of who our particular, ICP was.
Yeah, Kent smiled when you mentioned personality type, right? So I'll go where Kent knows I'm going to go. Bob Lutz, I believe he was the founder of a Mustang. He worked for Ford, right? Classic car guy. I don't remember what the title of the book I'm referencing is, but somewhere in there near the back, he calls that a personality type of a creative disruptive. I should have that like tattooed on my forehead or put on my business card or something, right? Is I can't help but see the opportunities and situations, right? It's not like I'm looking for problems, because all you do is point out problems, you're just complaining, right?
Yeah.
It's, how could things be better? And this is where Kent and I really work well together, is ideation on how to make something better, is how to get from here to there, right? I mean, I'm an INTP, I'm a personalysis like heavy green, I'm a disc like 311 or something. I mean, I'm a tough husband and a tough dad.
Yeah.
Kind of not easy to be around sometimes, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm just wired to make things better. And not from a problem perspective, but from an aspirational perspective, right? Is how can we get there? How can we get to that North Star? Right?
Yeah.
It's not about being a cranky nudge. It's about how can we get to where no one's been before. I mean, my final comment on this, Kent's heard me say this to a customer of ours. I'm old enough to remember, the space race and Kennedy's, getting American to the moon, returning safely by the end of the decade, right? That's one of the two most inspirational things in my lifetime. And then Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, right? I'm old enough to remember all of that stuff, real time, first person. And that's where we take, all of our, the creative capabilities we have and the research we've done and all of our expertise, but to focus it aspirationally on the founders and the investors, right? Is how can we help you get there, right? We're not here to tell you what's wrong. We're here to tell you how we can get you to that North Star. And I think that sets us apart too.
I love that. And, not necessarily like you're not unhappy with the world, right? Or unhappy with the situation. You just see where it could be, right? There's that dichotomy and that balance in those situations. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of our tent poles, if you look at the success of, investors writ large, 70+% of startups and startup investments fail.
Mm-hmm.
Some fail, just truly fail, crash outright, and just fail to return, whatever the expected exit happened to be. But, failure, it's like, how is that okay? That, 70+% of tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars a year are wasted on something that didn't turn out well.
Yeah.
And to me, the real sadness behind that is what great things got lost, got tied up in all that. What greatness could there have been but wasn't because the governance of some awesome new company with some awesome new solution wasn't there. So it fell apart. Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, that's it seems kind of silly, but I believe this is what's the loss to the world? What's the loss to humanity in these billions and billions of dollars that were wasted? And maybe what awesome companies didn't get funded because the pitch deck didn't look right. It wasn't pretty. The founder was, a little scruffy around the edges. So it didn't look good, but structurally was like the next right tail unicorn.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that leads into a really good question I have is what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who want to create something, maybe they're just starting out in their own company or they've got the idea that hasn't quite formulated yet. Like what advice would you give them, in starting their own business and starting it, I don't want to say with the end in mind, but, because we've kind of talked about that a little bit, but besides the end in mind, what other ideas and advice would you give them?
I would say that, they have to brace themselves for some disappointment early and learn from that, right? We have a person, she's the Avenger archetype, trying to do something really, really spectacular. We've kind of took the role of being their guardian angel, make sure that they don't, and we've spent, a fair amount of time in the early ideation phase about talking about, did you think about this? Did you think about that? And going back to one of the analyses that we did for this company I was talking about in LA earlier, we ran them through points of light diagnostic, and it's things like people don't think about, like, what happens? Do you have a business continuity strategy? Did you think about that? Did you think about, well, I know why you picked this location, but there's about 15 things that at a flip of a coin could go wrong, and so helping people kind of think through some of those things, that's one of the things that we do. I think that's one of the things that I think new energetic founders kind of miss they look at the cherry on top of the, versus the messy under stuff that, that it took to put the rest of it together and guard from keeping your business in business.
Yeah, I think I heard it once said that every founder, every business owner sees all the opportunity, but they don't see all the pitfalls that could happen if it doesn't come to fruition, right? We kind of get stuck on what's the dream versus the reality steps in between.
Yeah, and to play off here the dream, right? So go back to, Kennedy's, getting American to the moon and back by the end of the decade, right? There was all but no structure in place at the time to make that happen.
Yeah.
Right. There was no NASA technology as it was then. The whole moonshot is really what drove the technology industry we see today, right?
Hmm.
That's what fueled that. But that structure wasn't there. Right. So I'm a big fan of dream big because
Yeah.
big dreams tend to have big moats around them. But
Hmm.
the big dream it doesn't need to be complicated. I mean, one of the things we've seen out of the kind of the right tail superstars is a focus on like a universal pain problem, right? Whatever that is. So put the aspiration behind, what's the aspiration behind the resolution of a pain that's a universal-ish kind of problem. It's like you talk to somebody about it, it's like, yeah, I have that problem too. Boy, it should be nice if there was a way to, to fix that, to work around that. So I like the big dreams don't need to be grandiose. Find a big dream that's focused and just realize it's going to take you a bit to
Hmm.
get there. And it's not a 6-month process, right? Could very well be a 2 or 3 or 4 year process to get there. But dream big and don't be afraid to start.
Yeah. How much of a problem is like immediacy for some of the business owners you work with? Like they don't just want it, they want it now. And how, is that something you guys see often? And
No, you
Yeah.
never see
no,
that.
never, right? But how do you talk them off a ledge at that point, right? Like how do you get them to go, okay, you have an idea of what you want and you think it's going to take 6 months. Our research tells us it's going to take you 3 years, maybe, right? How do you talk them off that ledge and give them tools to sort of get on board with how long the process is really going to take?
I'll take a first crack at that one. One of them is you have to let them fail
Mm,
and call it out specifically. The company that we're advising, they wanted to sell all their products through a channel. And I said, well, that's great, and you do know how channel partners work, right? They like to take orders, not produce orders or
yeah.
produce value and stuff for their client from that standpoint, through the manufacturing side. I'm like, start to generate end user demand because then the channel will wake up to the fact that their customers are asking to buy something that you sell. It took them a year of lost energy before they came
Mm,
to the conclusion of, oh, we should focus on, end customers. So then somebody piped in on their leadership team about, well, we don't want to have a channel conflict. And I'm like, well, you're not selling anything through the channel to have a conflict with. So that's really not a problem. And when you deal with it, when you deal with it, but that would
yeah.
be one thing that, you know, leading, understanding it by experience, letting them have a little taste of, oh, ouch, that hurt. The stove's hot.
Mm,
And
Yeah, Kat, that's you're reading my mind. Yeah, Kat and I use that analogy with people all the time. There's a reason our moms and grandmas told us to keep our hands away from the top of the stove because it's hot,
right.
right? And just about we all found out the hard way. Oh yeah, darn, top of the stove is hot. It hurts. That's why you need to keep your hands away, right? And I mean, and I guess to both your points, that's really behind the creation of this capital physics thing that we have in this tool that's embedded in that called CAS, Capital Allocation Operating System, is to take the bias out of those conversations, to take the qualification, human interest stuff out of those conversations and to make it very matter of fact
Hmm.
to a founder. It's like, okay, so 1,000 companies, 60 right tail unicorns, 1,000 left tail disasters. Okay, where your company sits today, it has this, it's missing that. If you want to be one of those, you got to do this. Unless you keep doing, then you're going to be one of those.
Hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
kind of the Dr. House kind of persona, between the founders to the investors, right? We're great diagnosticians, and it's we're not out to call names and pick on personal issues or
Hmm.
qualitative issues. It's to get to the meat of this is why it's working, this is why it's not working. If you want to be successful, this is the stuff you got to do, and this is how long it's going to take to do that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very, very specific to or very meaningful advice. I mean, bespoke.
Yeah.
Right. There's a process, but whatever we might tell you, Shawn, is specific to you and your organization. Doesn't have anything to do with, what anybody else may be told.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've watched just with the two of you and is you guys play off each other so well, right? And one of our podcast itself is called Better Together. And, my wife and I realized at one point in time that we could build a better business together and a better life together than the two of us working separately, right? And so I'm curious for you two, what has helped you be better together as business leaders, than doing things separately?
Well, I'll take a start at that one. And as Bryan, tags himself as a creative disruptor. I'm a little bit like that. I'm also just, real pragmatic about, here's some processes and things to go through. I have a background in accounting and engineering both. So it's the kind of process sort of stuff is kind of, key to my heart. The thing that we've kind of figured out was we have really good chemistry, and
Mm-hmm.
we met, like Bryan said, 15 years ago, trying to solve really interesting clinical problem, real complex, with a bunch of, really smart people around, going, no, I'm better. I can do that all by myself, right? This is pre-AI. It's a machine learning kind of tool. We kind of looked at the problem same way. And then we were able to bounce ideas. I think Bryan used the term earlier, ideators, right? So we solved a lot of problems, going from hospital to hospital, learning and kind of bouncing stuff off and trying stuff. And then, it just ended up, just working out. And once again, it was, we met, and probably, 30 minutes later, we were on. So it was, that was probably serendipitous, but the chemistry is definitely big.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, guys, this has been a really, really fantastic discussion. I've loved it. I could keep asking you questions, but, we all have lives and things to do. Really quickly, if somebody wanted to work with you and KubiKai and, maybe help take their business to that next level, how can they get in touch with you?
Our website's pretty simple, www.kubikai, KUBIEKAI.com. I'm Kent at KubiKai.com, and Bryan is Bryan at KubiKai.com. So pretty simple. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't encourage everyone enough for any of our listeners to go and reach out to them. Their knowledge is just incredible. And this is now my second or third discussion with them, and just loved everything about what they do and helping businesses grow, and, and the approach they take to it, just very pragmatic, very, very honest, which, nowadays everybody needs, right? We don't have the time to not be told the truth about the situation we're in. So, but Kent, Bryan, thank you guys so much for being here today, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.